Yes.
Flight Lieutenant Pat Lardner-Burke recorded his last flight with MH434 in October of 1943. They'd been together on nearly 60 sorties and claimed 2.5 kills, 2 Focke-Wulf 190s and a Messerschmitt 109 he'd shot down with his 222 colleague. D-Day now loomed large on the horizon. It was the ultimate call to arms, a vital part of the Spitfire story. Unfortunately, we lose track of our plane 3 months before the Normandy landings. These photos of MH434 were taken then at Hornchurch. Flight Lieutenant Lardner-Burke was put in charge of one squadron, and he played an active role on D-Day. Sadly, the D-Day generation are disappearing, but there are still a few special people who remember one of the most extraordinary days in our history.
When we flew on the morning of June the 6th, the Solent was empty, all the mechanised vehicles had gone, and one thought about those boys on the beaches, although we didn't know how bad it was going to be.
We took off at 4 something, and we were over the beaches at 5:20 for the dawn. And we looked down and saw this colossal armada. I mean, everybody's described it better than I can.
I do believe that in World War II, a Spitfire pilot's role was an extremely important one, and obviously the landings in D-Day and the need for protection to our thousands of ships and the men who went across was a vital protective element.
The sea was just littered with ships. The Navy were there with several of the captured French battleships as well, and they were all firing up into the air, mainly at us. I think they'd been warned there was going to be a huge invasion of probably of 109s, which look a little bit like a Spitfire, and everybody's a bit trigger happy, I suppose. We didn't grumble about it. It was a natural thing, I suppose, to happen. At least they were firing at somebody.
The Spitfire story has so many elements: sacrifice, bravery, even glamour. The British people loved the Spitfire. It's a romance of a kind, but I don't think any Spitfire love story can beat this one. Engineer Joe and truck driver Betty, or Butch to her friends, met working on Spitfires during the war.
If there's 3 things concerned in this story, it's Betty, Joe and the Spitfire.
Their love story began in a hangar at Biggin Hill in 1943.
Joe was standing on the wing of the plane.
A plane like this?
Yes. And of course they were all cheeky.
Were they?
Oh, yes.
I looked at her and I thought, I wonder.
You wonder what?
She's the best. She's the best looking lot in that bunch. I wonder if I got a chance with her.
Right.
And I obviously had, because I think she said something like it, but a lot ruder.
Did you really? Can you remember that, Betty?
I think it was a bit saucy.
Now, go on, tell us. You can tell us now. We're ready for it.
And if you don't, I will.
You say so.
She says I'm having some of that.
Did you really? Goodness me, I mean, this is shocking,
she's only 22, you know. We were both 22 then.
So before you knew where you were going to dances together?
Yes. Well, we were both mad on dancing.
Right.
Absolutely mad on dancing.
Like you.
Joe and Betty's friendship blossomed in the dance halls in and around London. A night of dancing the foxtrot, the waltz and the rumba provided them and other servicemen and women with a brief respite from the realities of the war. But as Joe and Betty grew closer, there was one reality they could not escape from.
We had feelings for each other, but Bet had informed me. She says, look, I am engaged. Now,
Right.
Bet was engaged to a sergeant engine fitter in the RAF in the Middle East.
Right.
After that, as far as I was concerned, there was no romance. There wasn't going to be any romance. I wasn't going to query that bloke's pitch when I'd drawn the good straw languishing at home and he was out in the desert.
So you then felt, Betty, that you made a promise to your fiancé?
My fiancé had arrived in England, and I had to come and tell Joe that that he had come home, and this would have to be the end of it, you see. And my old life was returning, and I had to forget Joe, but I was very, very upset, in tears.
I asked her to marry me. I'd got it out. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to hear myself ask her.
Because you knew
Because
that
I
you
knew
were...
that she wouldn't say yes. Not that I didn't want her to say yes. I would have loved her to have said yes, but she couldn't.
It was a very hard thing to say no to Joe,
Yeah.
really. It's something I can't answer, really.
Well, I'm not even going to try and help you here, love, because I can't. I know the dilemma you must have been in.
Yes.
I wasn't. I was footloose and fancy-free, so I couldn't put myself in your place.
No.
And I knew that if I asked you and expected an answer, I'd be hurting you, causing you more problems, so I didn't push it.
Joe and Betty had their last dance together in the Worthing Town Hall in 1944. Joe tells me it was a slow foxtrot. Betty married her fiancé, and Joe also settled down and started a family. In 2004, now both widowed, Betty was watching the telly when, there on the screen, she recognized an old friend, talking about his beloved Spitfire. Soon afterwards, they spoke to each other for the first time in 60 years. Once again, some of that old Spitfire magic had brought Joe and Betty together.
I knew that we must meet. We must see each other again to see if there was still a light. And she met me at Chichester Station. And to me, she looked like the same lass I'd said cheerio to 60 years ago.
Really?
Yes.
What did you think about him?
Well, he had the same voice, a little grey, but just the same old Joe.
We went about like we used to when we were 22. We'd even old bloody hands people used to look at us gone out, you know. But it's very hard to explain, John, very hard.
Yeah.
It was there, wasn't it, love, and
Oh,
it still
yes,
is.
yes.
I think, really, we get on better, in a way, because we have more time together, rather than just under a bloody Spitfire wing, or in a dispersal hut, or in some snoggy little dance hall somewhere. We're our own people now, and we live in it that way, the way we would have done had we got married in the times we met.
These last 7 years have been wonderful.
And you love each other,
Of course we do.
Well, there's that many ways of defining love, I don't know, but if it means do you want to be together all the time, yes, we do.
Yes.
Well, for me, that is the greatest love story ever told. The final scene in our Spitfire story. But surely endings don't always have to be cut and dried. We've left some loose ends. What about our plane, MH434? You might have thought its fighting days were over when World War II ended, but they weren't. It flew for the Royal Dutch Air Force, crash landing in the Dutch East Indies in 1947, and then moved to the Belgian Air Force before returning to Britain in the 1950s. The Spitfire. It's 75 years since the first one flew, and they're now more beautiful than ever. The pilots who fly them say there's nothing better. But we can't just leave it like that. It's time for former Cadet Sergeant Sargent to have a go. And here's my new best friend, a Spitfire with room for two.
Oh, this is the moment. This is the moment. And we're taking off. Wow.
It was the greatest thrill of my life.
Wow.